name is Lisa Gray. I'm the president and founder of A Promise to Jordan. For those of you who do not know me, there are quite a few new faces here, so I'm very happy to see that. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started since you guys were all here on time. I appreciate that. I think we're expecting quite a few more people, but I want to run through a few announcements for the first 5 minutes, and so then we'll get started. So hopefully we'll have some more people coming in. We also have some drinks and little snacks for you that'll be coming in as well. First of all, I wanted to share with you, if you have not heard, we have an event coming up at Simsbury High School on November 18th, which is will be Jordan's 26th birthday. I think all of you know, but for new people, our group is named for my son, Jordan, who passed away last year on June 30th at the age of 24 from a heroin and fentanyl overdose. And he struggled for 9 years. So I started this group in his name to help raise awareness of the problem of addiction, substance use disorders in communities like Simsbury, and to help erase the stigma surrounding mental illness and addiction. So his birthday is November 18th. We're having a fantastic addiction awareness event at Simsbury High School, where he graduated from high school. John Lally, who is your speaker today, has this incredible project that he started, and I'm sure he'll tell you his story, but he lost his son in January of 2016, also to an overdose. And at that time, he had a large 2x3 poster of his son made with the town that he was from and 2 words that described him: artist and musician. Is that it? Yes. And then he invited other families of loved ones who have been lost to the disease of addiction to have those posters made. And his project or collection of posters now numbers, 350 you must be at by now, John? 356 he's at now. It does cover 36 states now. It was originally only in Connecticut, but he does cover 36 states now. There are, 140 from Connecticut, approximately, and he's going to be bringing those 140 posters to put on display on the field at Simsbury High School. So it's going to be a very impactful event for the students. When you see this display, it is very moving, very emotional, very impactful, and it's something that I think young people need to see, because they need to look at these pictures and see these beautiful faces of so many people who have been lost and realize that it could be them, it could be their brother or sister, it could be their best friend. So that is a big part of the project that we're going to be doing, but we also want to make it fun and something that the kids want to attend. It's not just about them coming there and hearing, "Don't do drugs." They've been hearing that for years. Obviously, it's not working. So we need to take another approach. We want to have some activities there. They're going to be fun for them. We're going to have a food truck where they can get a burger or a taco if they want to. We're going to have some music. And they're going to learn about addiction and substance use disorders and how to stay healthy or how to get healthy if they or someone they love is already having a problem. So plan on that. We're going to need some help because it is less than 2 months away now. That we don't have a lot of time to plan. So I do have a planning meeting happening at my house on Sunday at 4:30 in Weetog. If you're interested in joining us, please catch me before the end of the meeting and I can give you my address. Also, I have another meeting at Simsbury Public Library on Monday, October 7th at 5 o'clock, because we are going to be working toward designating Simsbury as only the 3rd community in the state of Connecticut to earn the recovery-friendly designation from the state of Connecticut's Drug and Alcohol Policy Council. And there are a lot of criteria that we have to meet for that, so I'm having, this is just an informational meeting only. It doesn't commit you to being on the task force or anything. If you'd like to come and just hear what it would mean for us to be designated as recovery-friendly, and what it would take us to get there. It'll be in the Barnes Room at 5 o'clock at the Simsbury Public Library. Our next group meeting will be October 15th. Unfortunately, I don't have a location for you because I can't remember it because I've got too many things to keep straight, but if you're on our email list, you will be notified about it. This should be a really good one. It's October 15th, 6 o'clock. It's the relationship between ADHD and substance use disorders. Yeah, that should be a good one. A lot of us have kids or grandkids who have been diagnosed with ADHD. My son Jordan had been diagnosed at the age of 7 with ADHD, and I definitely believe it contributed to his substance use disorders. So it should be some very good information there. I do have some t-shirts and tanks that are available on the back table that we're doing as a fundraiser. The tank tops are $12, the t-shirts are $15 if you'd like to pick one up before you leave today. And the really huge announcement that I have for you, if you did not see it on Facebook or have not heard about it on the radio this week, as a result of my son's passing in June of last year, his father was the former CEO of the Greater Hartford Association of Realtors. So members and staff from the Connecticut Association of Realtors attended my son's service. And they were so moved by the eulogy that I gave of my son and the fact that it hit so close to home with someone that they knew so well, that they were inspired to start this movement, this campaign called CT Recovers. And they just launched it last week. And through their relationship with iHeartRadio and WTNH Channel 8 in New Haven, they are doing a fundraising concert on November 17th, which is the day before Jordan's birthday. And it's at this little venue that no one's ever heard of, Mohegan Sun, and by this little artist who has no notoriety whatsoever, Keith Urban. Keith Urban, and the interesting thing about this is that Keith Urban is not currently on tour. He is only coming to Connecticut to do this concert, a concert for recovery. So tickets are on sale now through Ticketmaster. When I checked this morning, there were only about 800 left. So if you're interested in going, I would suggest you go home tonight and get on Ticketmaster and try to get your tickets. So very exciting stuff. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce your guest speaker tonight, John Lally. John Lally is a psychiatric nurse practitioner with master's degrees in marriage and family therapy and nursing. He has recently retired from his private practice in East Windsor doing psychotherapy and psychopharmacology, and has worked in the field of psychiatry and substance abuse for the last 35 years in inpatient, outpatient, and community mental health settings. He's also a member of the American Society of Addiction Medicine. Since the death of his son, Tim, from a heroin overdose in January 2016, he founded and is the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Today I Matter, Inc., TIM. Their mission is to work to reduce the shame and stigma of mental illness and addiction while promoting the physical, emotional, and mental health of our communities. Please join me in welcoming John Lally.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I guess there's nothing left to do to introduce myself, but just to say that, like Lisa, I'm a parent who's lost a child. And I think everyone here probably knows someone who struggles. If you don't know someone who's passed from addiction or mental illness or suicide, you know someone who's struggling. I know you do. Even though you may not be aware they're struggling. But every one of you has someone in your life, has some connection with someone who is struggling. This disease, when we're talking about overdose especially, has hit every single community in the country and in the world, almost in the world, but certainly in the state and in the country. And the numbers are getting worse. We're losing more people. This year, 2019, is shaping up to have more overdose deaths in Connecticut than ever before. The two topics we're talking about tonight, one is related to overdose, and the other one is related to suicide. When you put those two occurrences together, I found this horribly fascinating statistic. For the last 2 years, the average life expectancy in the United States has gone down. That's never happened since World War I. During World War I, with the millions of people dying in the war, and there were pandemic flu outbreaks around the world, that's the only other time, over 100 years ago, where the actual life expectancy has gone down. And they say the reason for that is overdose and suicide. So I don't have to say too much more than that, I think, for me to say, wow, this is a big problem. And that's why we're here tonight. We're here to talk about two separate topics. One method called QPR, which is a simple method you're going to learn to help someone who might be struggling with suicide, or even not thinking about suicide, but they're really struggling. They feel like they're on their edge. They feel like they've had enough, and they're pushed to the limit. And the other next training will be to talk about Narcan, which can save a life from overdose. So two of these methods are very simple. You're going to walk out of here tonight, and if you ever need to use them, you might save a life. And this happens everywhere. These days, there's so many people struggling we'll say, to talk about the overdoses first, that they can happen anywhere. It can happen in your grocery store, in the parking lot. My brother-in-law had his condo, pulled into his condo parking lot a few weeks ago, and there was a man in the car slumped over who had just overdosed. Never expected to come across that. A few weeks ago, we heard about someone overdosing on an airplane. Some of you might have heard about that. So it's happening everywhere. Any one of you could possibly run into this. Like with mental illness, like with substance abuse, our message is, don't think it can't happen to you. Don't think it can't happen in my family. Don't think it can't happen in my town. I used to think that. You know, I'm a medical professional. My wife is a medical professional. You know, we did like most thoughtful parents from day one. We were very thoughtful about how we raised our kids. This was going to be the perfect child before we had him. We had everything planned out. Everything was going to go well. You know, and with our professions, we're fortunate that financially we were well off. We were stable. We lived in a stable community. We had a good, supportive family. What more could you need or want? Yet, my son developed, first he developed severe anxiety and depression. And he struggled every day. We tried different meds, tried different therapies, and nothing seemed to really help him feel better. Until one day he tried a pill, an opiate pill, which we're going to talk about today. And it made him feel better. He was able to get out of bed in the morning and get through the day. It's the first time maybe that ever happened to him since he started with this illness in high school. But then, as many of us know, that's how it starts, with the pills. And then you need more pills, and then you get used to the pills, and then you get tolerant to the pills, and you need more doses. You need higher doses and more pills. And then the pills dry up or they get too expensive. So what do? You go to the street. And heroin is cheaper and easier to get than the pills these days, even though the pills are easy too. Heroin is cheaper and easier to get. And nowadays, you've probably heard about fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid like heroin, but it's made in a lab, and they're putting that it's out in the supply now. Most of the people that are dying these days in Connecticut from an opioid overdose are dying from fentanyl. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about that more, but I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of why we're here. So we're really talking about saving lives. Last year we had a few, in Connecticut, the numbers dropped from the year before of overdose deaths by like 18, even though they're going to be a lot higher now. But the reason they dropped is because of Narcan. There's more Narcan on the street. There's more people coming to trainings like this and going home with a dose of Narcan, and it's very simple. You can use it very simply, and within minutes you can bring someone back from nearly dead. So that's why you're here tonight, and that's what you're going to go home with. And every one of you will be prepared to maybe save a life someday and make a real difference in someone's life. Okay? So we're going to start with the first portion tonight, QPR. It stands for question, persuade, and refer. We've all heard of CPR. Right? It's got so common in our head, we know what CPR is. Even if we haven't been trained, we know what CPR is. Everyone knows CPR. Everyone knows that if someone drops from a heart attack, from a cardiac arrest, CPR is something that people that know how to can do it and save their lives and get them to the hospital. So they came up with, well, what if people who are also struggling with mental illness, with severe depression, and feeling like they're going to end it all? QPR. We're going to know QPR just as well as CPR. It's a very simple method to learn that you can help to save someone's life. We're not trying to turn you into therapists here or professional health people, not by any means. But through a very simple intervention, you might be able to get someone to go get treatment. All right, so we're going to start with that. As I go along, please feel free to ask any questions that we have. Okay, so QPR, question, persuade, refer. We're going to refer to each of those steps as we go along. Just a couple of things we're going to start with. Language does matter. Language matters in when people hear the way we talk to them, they get an impression of what we mean, what we think, what our attitudes are. And so it's real important to think about that. So they're trying to shift how we think about things and how we talk about things. For instance, we want to avoid the term committed suicide. Committed sounds like a crime. Now, in some states, I think suicide may actually be a crime, but I don't think everyone's ever been prosecuted for killing themselves. But we want to take away, the attitude, the thought that this is someone who's struggling, who at that moment, that option felt like the best they could do. So let's not throw fire, oil on the fire, is that gas on the fire? So we can say death died by suicide, though they ended his or her life. It's a more gentler way to talk about someone, because when we talk about someone who's already dead, it's the family we want to worry about. They're already struggling enough. So we want to just soften it up a little bit. And for people who have tried to kill themselves and they lived through it, we don't want to say anymore it was a failed suicide attempt. That's what we used to call it. If you think about it, this is someone who's already probably feeling worthless, maybe feeling like a failure. And now we want to say, yeah, you failed at something else. You couldn't even kill yourself. So it might sound like just semantics here, but we want to try to be gentle when we talk about someone who's struggling. And sometimes the words can make a big difference. Okay, as I said, this is not intended to be a form of counseling or treatment. Just like CPR is not a way to treat heart disease. It's just saving their life, getting them off to the hospital so then they could get treatment. So this is all we're talking about. And the idea of CPR is to offer some hope through intervention, through just a connection, a human being talking with another person. It might be all that takes. We're going to start with just a quick, like a 3-minute video, just to kind of introduce this for us here tonight.
Research shows that the odds of surviving a heart attack in a public place are 10 times greater in regions where thousands of ordinary citizens are trained in CPR. It's called bystander rescue. When someone shows signs of experiencing cardiac arrest, the response of nearby friends, family, or coworkers is critical. The effective use of CPR doubles or triples one's chances of surviving a heart attack. Like CPR, QPR is an emergency intervention for someone experiencing a life-threatening crisis. QPR is easy to learn and easy to remember, but it takes courage to overcome our fears about reaching out to help someone who may be considering suicide. Research also shows that where QPR is widely taught, suicide attempts and deaths decrease. Just like CPR, QPR requires quick, bold, and informed action. Because suicide, like heart attacks, remains a rare event, we must train hundreds to save one, thousands to save hundreds, and millions to save thousands. There is an old Welsh saying, "No great misery goes unspoken." When we have a toothache, we tell people. We don't hide our pain. But because of the stigma and taboo around the word suicide, many people considering suicide don't speak plainly about their suffering. They fear our rejection. They fear that if they say something, we will ridicule them or make fun of them. As a result, people thinking about suicide often use indirect language. They hint at what they're thinking of doing. They send us coded messages, and they suffer in silence. Called suicide warning signs, QPR training teaches you how to recognize these warning signs, quickly decode them, and then question the person in an informed and compassionate manner to learn if they are considering suicide. Just as talking about physical pain helps diminish it, talking about suicide with someone willing and able to listen reduces psychological pain almost immediately. Trained QPR gatekeepers are merchants of hope, and hope helps prevent suicide. Millions of people have now been trained in QPR. Rigorous independent research studies support QPR as effective, and thousands of personal stories assure us that QPR is saving lives. When you use QPR, not everyone will be suicidal. Some people are simply stressed to the breaking point, but they still need help you can give. Please note that you cannot put the idea of suicide into someone's mind. People are either thinking about suicide or they're not. The fear of putting the idea of suicide into someone's head is a myth that keeps us from acting when we should do just the opposite. QPR is a universal intervention for people in pain, whether they're thinking about suicide or not. While it takes a special courage to overcome our fears, we will teach you how to ask about suicide and to offer hope through listening. Listening is the power tool that restores hope in the hopeless. We know you can do this, and we will show you how. Preventing suicide. It's what people do.
So just a couple of statistics, and we'll just throw a few of these, not a lot, but 47,000 people die annually in the United States to suicide. And as you can see, if you can see in this diagram here, the numbers are going up every year. So obviously, as we said, it's getting worse. 1 every 12 minutes in the United States, there's one person that dies from suicide. 5,723 young people between 15 and 24 died in 1 year. Suicide is the leading cause of death. It's number 11, the leading cause of deaths for people in the country, amongst anything you can think of. National ranking, Connecticut is ranked number 45 out of 50 states. Everyone's got to be ranked somewhere, but even number 50, there's 51 counting Washington, D.C. Even though they may be last in the rate, there's still a lot of people dying, so we don't want to take any comfort that we're 45. In Connecticut alone, this is some statistics from last year. On the average, one person dies by suicide every 22 minutes in Connecticut, round the clock. Almost 3 every single hour. This is going on and on and on. More than 3 times as many people died by suicide in Connecticut in 2017 with those statistics than died by motor vehicle accidents. So again, just trying to get some context here, what the problem is about. They did a survey of school students in Connecticut. And so on the average classroom of 30 students in a class, we'll say, and on average again, 8 students talked about feeling sad or hopeless for a 2-week period continuously. Out of that 30 students, 4 of them seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. And then 2 of them actually attempted to kill themselves. Out of every 30 students, again, on average, in the classrooms in Connecticut. 6 of them purposely hurt themselves in the past year by cutting or burning. So a lot of kids are struggling, right? On the good side, out of those 30, at least 7 say they did see a doctor, nurse, or counselor about dealing with stress. And 21 of them out of 30 said they know that there is someone in their life, an adult, or someone that they could go to and talk about when they're struggling. So that's good, if we can just kind of promote that a little bit more. For every attempted suicide, there is 25 attempts for each death. So for every person that we hear about that died by suicide, statistically, 25 for every one of those has attempted suicide. So thankfully, most people who attempt it survive, but we're still losing a lot of people. So think about all the people we're losing. 25 times that are really struggling to the point where they're actually considered and tried to end their life. So again, just trying to get an estimate in our head of how bad the problem is. This, for the purposes of this company, the QPR company, they put statistics together. They use a phrase called suicide survivors. In my mind, I used to think that was someone who tried to commit suicide but survived it. That's not what they're talking about here. Just for a few minutes, please go with me on this. What they're talking about here as a suicide survivor is a blood relative of someone who died by suicide. So that's the people around them, blood relatives, who have had to survive the loss of a loved one in their family. Yes, you had a question?
So you could equate that to like a widower, essentially, like in a certain way?
Right, you could think of that, a blood relative again. So for each person who died, on average there's 6 people who are blood relatives who are now survivors of suicide, meaning they're having to live with that and go on, knowing someone close to them has died by suicide. So 6 are directed by each side. So that means statistically, 1 out of every 62 of us is a blood relative of someone who died by suicide. Okay? 1 suicide every 12 minutes means 6 new survivors. Okay, so we keep adding up, and won't get into this all, but you get the message, how this is building and building, and more people are becoming effective. So if 40,000 plus Americans die by suicide, over 240,000 blood relatives are now suicide survivors, 250,000. And that's just blood relatives. That doesn't count families, friends, co-workers, colleagues. Did you have something?
I'm curious if there's any significant difference between male and female suicide rates or attempts.
There is a big difference between male and female. Females statistically are more likely to try to kill themselves. They do it more often. males are more likely to actually die from a suicide attempt. Even though there are fewer men trying to kill themselves, they tend to use more lethal methods. That's the big difference. Again, this is just on average. It doesn't, any individual could do any of this. But men tend to use more lethal methods like guns. You're more likely to die when you shoot yourself than when you take an overdose of pills, which is the most common way that women will try suicide. You take an overdose of pills, there's a chance you might survive. Someone might get to you soon, get you to the hospital, get you through. But if you put a gun to your head, that's probably it. So that tends to explain it a little bit. So men die more from suicide, but women attempt it more. Okay. Some myths we should talk about suicide, okay? One is no one can stop a suicide. It's inevitable. I already told you that's a myth, so you know that's not true, right? If a person's in crisis, gets the help they need, they may never be suicidal again. If someone in crisis gets the help, I've been in psychiatry for over 35 years. I've worked with a lot of people who are suicidal. If you get the help, most of them will go on and do well. Most of them will live and be glad that they didn't actually carry it out. So there is hope. But it's not inevitable. The next myth, confronting a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. Again, I already told you that's a myth, right? It says right there. Asking someone directly about suicide actually lowers the risk. They just want to be approached sometimes. You know, there's a story, a book actually written by a California state trooper. His beat was the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. He had to cover the bridge in his beat, right? Now, the Golden Gate Bridge is a place that's been famous for suicide over the years. And that was his job, to watch for people that might be jumping. And what he says, he's found in his experience over many years doing this, is that most of the people he stops and talks to tell him, I just needed someone to say a word to me. Just needed someone to approach me and say, I care, are you okay, buddy? Can we talk? Can we do something? Just by approaching people, most of the time, he'll get them not to jump. There was a guy who wrote a book who actually did jump from the Golden Gate Bridge, and he survived. Very few people have survived that jump. But he talks about that too. If one person had to stop and talk to him before he went off the bridge, he probably wouldn't have jumped. Okay? So when you think about it, people at this point of their life are really at the edge, obviously. They're probably feeling like there's hope, there's no hope. Life is not going to get better. Nobody cares. I'm all alone. And they'd probably be better off without me. And I'm all by myself and there's no other way. We talk about suicide as not a problem. Suicide is a perceived solution to their problem, right? So the problem is they're feeling isolated, they're feeling hopeless, they're feeling like life can't get better, doesn't matter what I do. So suicide is the solution that they choose. Well, we're here to say, wait a minute, there may be other solutions to your problem. So sometimes just talking to that person and helping them realize there might be another way, you can often save a life. Next myth, only experts can prevent suicide. Again, wrong. Unless you want to count yourself all experts once you've been through a QPR training. But everyone in here, even if you haven't been through a QPR training, just by reaching out and talking to someone who's struggling, you might save a life. A couple more. Suicidal people keep the plans to themselves. Okay, most of them don't. Most of them will communicate it. Now, not always directly. We'll talk about signs of how people communicate it directly or indirectly. Not everyone who's thinking about suicide will tell you that, I'm going to kill myself. But they might make other remarks that can kind of hint, and we're going to give you some examples of those soon. Those who talk about suicide don't do it. Again, another myth. They often will. If there's no intervention, they often will. So we don't think as long as they're talking, then they're fine. That's not true. Another myth. Once a person decides to complete suicide, there's nothing you can do to stop them. Like the guys talked about on the Golden Gate Bridge. They had that decision. They were going to do it. They went all the way out there. They can be stopped, right up to the point. It's possible to intervene and stop it. Okay? And then, so it is preventable. So, now we're going to talk about signs and clues. Remember, some people might not, they're going to give you some clues, but it might not be directly. Okay? So, you want to take all the signs seriously. There are some direct clues, right? They tell you right out, I'm going to kill myself, right? I wish I were dead. I'm going to commit suicide. People will say that. Or I'm going to end it all. Or they'll say, if such and such a thing happens, if I lose this job, if my divorce goes through, whatever, I'm going to kill myself. Those are pretty clear, right, when people are talking about that. Those are more direct clues. I'm just tired of life. I can't go on. My family will be better off without me. Who cares if I'm dead? I just want out. I won't be around much longer. So people will make statements like this. So besides things they say, there might be behaviors that we can also see that might cue us in that something's going on, right? Certainly a previous suicide attempt. If someone's really struggling and they're really depressed and they have a history of trying to kill themselves, you want to think that they could be bringing that back up again, right? Acquiring a gun or stockpiling pills. Now again, just the fact that someone goes and buys a gun certainly doesn't mean they're suicidal. But if someone's struggling and they're on the edge, you want to put the clues together. The more they build up. If someone's talking about feeling hopeless and then they go out and buy a gun, that could be a clue. Stockpiling pills. Like we said, a common way many people will try to kill themselves is by overdosing in pills. And it could be anything. It could be even Tylenol they're stocking up. You can buy a lot of Tylenol and die from that. Other cues, co-occurring depression, moodiness, or loneliness. So we know they also have some kind of a mental illness that they're really struggling with. It's another possible clue. Suddenly they're putting their personal affairs in order, like they're preparing that they're going to be leaving all of a sudden. Where's that coming from? You see that? It can be a clue. Or a sudden interest or disinterest in religion. If it's not the way they've been and suddenly it switches, kind of wonder why. Why now? Why is there change? Okay. Or drug or alcohol abuse or relapse, if someone's struggling with drug or alcohol abuse. Can be, again, a behavioral sign. So we got verbal cues, we got behavioral cues, the way people are behaving, and then these are some situations that can push people over the edge. Okay, being fired or expelled from school. For some people, that could just be the last straw, right? A recent unwanted move, loss of a major relationship, certainly, or death of a spouse or a close friend. Diagnosis of a serious or terminal illness, or fear of punishment. Say someone's going to jail. That could be the last thing. There's no way I'm going to handle that. And that could be a situation that could push someone over the edge. And then loss of a cherished therapist, counselor, or teacher, someone I really relied on to help get me through, and now they're gone. Or fear of becoming a burden to others. You know, I'm depressed, I'm not working, I can't get out of bed. I'm just a lot of work for people around me. I'm just a burden, okay? I'm not going to talk about these are really for when we do the class for students in school. So I'm going to just go past that a little bit. So we're back to now really the meat of QPR, question, persuade, refer. So we got some ideas that someone might be struggling. Maybe they're thinking about suicide, all right? We had some cues. They're either things they're saying, ways they're behaving, and or situations, like we just said, that they might be experiencing. So now we have a sense that maybe someone is having a hard time. So now QPR comes in. The first thing is question. And there's tips for asking the question. If in doubt, don't wait, okay? We want to ask, we want to be direct. Now this is hard. A lot of people, I know a lot of health professionals that have a hard time directly saying to someone, do you have thoughts of killing yourself? Do you have thoughts of suicide? They kind of beat around a little bit because of their own discomfort. We want to try to get past that and just talk about it, okay? If the person is reluctant, you want to be persistent. If they say, no, I'm fine, leave me alone, you might want to back off a little bit, but then keep an eye on them. Maybe approach them again, right? Or maybe you want to pull them aside where there's not a crowd of people and say, you know, I just see you're struggling. You know, can I help you? So you want to start the question, allow the person to talk freely, giving yourself plenty of time if you can. It's not always easy, depending on the situation. But what we certainly don't want to do is you're talking to someone who might be struggling, and you're looking at your watch saying, I got 5 minutes, you know? Again, you might be well-intentioned, but someone's not going to open up right then. They're going to say, I'm going to let it go, all right? So you want to try to give yourself plenty of time. And if you have any resources handy, if you know some phone numbers that people can call, you're going to go home with a QPR booklet, they'll have some resources, some hotlines, some people you can call. All right, so that's when you're asking the question. Remember, it's the fact that you ask it is more important than how you ask it, right? You just want to break that ice and get the question out there. So there are different approaches. You can be direct or not so direct to ask them. So you can say things like, excuse me, have you been unhappy lately? Or have you been very unhappy? This kind of ramps it up. Or have you been so unhappy that you've been thinking about ending your life? You know, those are questions that we might be more comfortable. But you want to build up then. And then, do you ever wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? Okay, now people will think about it that way. Let's see, I'm going for it, excuse me. But more directly, you can say, I like this one. You know, when people are upset as you seem to be, sometimes they wish they were dead. Have you ever felt like that? That's a very gentle way to kind of say it to someone. You're bringing up the idea of suicide. And directly, have you ever felt like that? Some people think about killing themselves. You look like you're struggling. That could be a really good icebreaker for someone. You look pretty miserable. I wonder if you're thinking about suicide. Right? Or just quickly, are you thinking about killing yourself? Just put it right out there. But you want to get to that question. If you give them an idea, the person you're talking to, that you're uncomfortable talking about it, they might feel uncomfortable too. Maybe you're not the best person they want to talk to because they sense your discomfort. Last thing they want to do is be a burden to you too, right? So you want to try to think about this and try to talk about it in a comfortable way. It's not always easy, I know. This is a very tough subject. I will say, by the way, as we're going through this, if you need to step out, this can be a very difficult for some people. If you need to step out for a couple minutes, we'll have someone just come out and check in on you and see if you're okay. But it happens sometimes. Some of us in this room know someone who's been here, I'm sure. Okay, how not to ask the question. These seem kind of silly, but these are a lot of ways of people to talk. You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Whoa, I guess not. I'm not going to talk about it to you then, right? If you come across like that. Or this next one, I've heard a lot. You wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? We probably can imagine people saying that. Now, I'm already feeling hopeless. I feel like I'm worthless. And you're talking to me like, if I'm thinking that, I must be pretty stupid. That's not going to open up any communication with me, is it? Or suicide's a dumb idea, so surely you're not thinking about suicide. All right? Well, I guess I'm not going to admit it to you then, if I am. Did you want to say something?
No, I think also telling people that that's really selfish for them to be thinking about suicide, meaning that they don't care about their family, what it would do to other people. So you must be really selfish to be thinking like that.
Yeah. How helpful do you think that would be?
Probably not.
Okay. Again, the idea of this is you want to communicate with someone who's struggling. You want to let them know, you know what, you may not know me, but I care about you. I'm here if you just want to talk. You want to open up the communication. Let them know there's at least one person in the world today who cares about what you're thinking and feeling. That's the key. And so you want, like you said, you want to think about how you say that. All right? Just kind of so they can feel comfortable. So they know they're with someone who's not trying to judge them, who just wants to know if there's anything I can do to help. Okay? All right. So we got the question. We got to figure out, we got to ask the question. We gave some tips on what to say and how to ask the question. So now you question them and you get an answer of, yeah, I am thinking about suicide. Or it might not even be that, but I'm close to it. Maybe I'm not thinking about suicide, but I'm feeling like I'm at the end of my rope. I don't know where to go. Suicide might be an option for me. I don't know what I'm going to do tonight. I may not even go home. I don't know, right? So they may not be directly suicide, but they're at the point where they're at near the end of their rope. So the Q is the question. Now the P is persuade. So you've questioned them. You've got an idea now that they're struggling. The P, now you want to persuade them that there is another option, that hope is possible, right? Remember we talked about suicide being their perceived solution to their problem. We want to say, well, whatever problem you have, maybe it's divorce, maybe it's death of a loved one, maybe you got fired, maybe you lost your money, maybe you're struggling with depression. Whatever the problem is, there might be another option, another solution besides suicide. We just want to breach that subject. Maybe there's another solution that doesn't have to end in suicide. So you want to persuade them that there might be another solution. Okay? So you want to listen to the problem, give them your full attention. Remember, as you just said, suicide's not the problem. It's their solution to their problem. And don't rush to judgment. In any way you can offer hope. Hope is just like, if you want to talk, someone cares. That can offer hope. Just like the guy in the bridge side, just approaching someone and saying, how you doing? Are you doing okay? Can I help you? That can give a little bit of hope. kind of breaks your chain of thought. Maybe there is some other way. Maybe it doesn't have to be the way I was planning. Okay? So you want to talk to them about that. And then finally, refer. Now, refer means you want to get them to help. You've questioned them. You've realized that they're really at the end of the rope. They're struggling. They might be thinking about suicide. You've talked to them that, there can be hope. There can be another way around this. I care. Let's just talk. But then how are they going to get that hope? Where are they going to get that other solution? So we want to refer them. And again, you're not going to know all the referrals, but you're going to maybe have, certainly 911 is always a referral. If you really have no other option and you're really afraid for someone, you can always call 911, all right? So we all know that number right at the top of our head. So there's always something you can do, okay? But there's sometimes more than that. So suicidal people often believe they cannot be helped. So you're there to show them, well, maybe there are things we can do, right? And so the best referral is, if you can do it, is taking them right to someone who can help. And we can't always do that, right? But that's the best thing. If we could do that, I'll drive you down to the ER, right? I'll walk you down to the emergency room. I'll sit with you while we make a call to the hotline, right? So you want to actually take them right to where they can possibly get some help. We can't all do that, so there may be other things we can do. The next best is getting a commitment for them. Tell you what, I'll give you this phone number. I got this card here. I know a therapist or whatever. Here's somebody you can call. You think you can do that? If you can get a commitment from them, that, all right, maybe I'll give that a try. That's the next best thing. I mean, it's always best if you can walk someone to it. Certainly, they're going to get there. But if you can't do that, then trying to get some commitment for them and give them a number somewhere they can reach out. The third best is to give them information and try to get a good faith commitment that they won't kill themselves, at least until eventually they get some help. Again, it's still best if you can get someone to help, a connection. We call a warm handoff in medical care. If you can get actually person-to-person handoff. So now someone else is already connected. Before you pull out, before you leave the interaction, someone else has made the connection with them. That's going to take over from there, if there's any way you can do that. Right? Just an example here. This is what they call in the lethal triad in suicide. These are 3 signs or symptoms or behavioral clues or situations. If you see all 3 together, there's ding, 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 ding. The red flag's got to go up, right? And it has to do with someone who's upset, not just upset, but we're talking about people who are really struggling, feel like the end of their rope, their depression, they're feeling hopeless. They have a firearm available, and they're drinking. If you put all those 3 together, statistics show something bad's about to happen. Now, any one of those things by themselves, just because someone has a gun doesn't mean they're suicidal. Most people who have guns are not. Most people who have a drink of alcohol are not suicidal. And most people who are depressed are not suicidal. But if you put those together, you just want to know right away, 911, don't hesitate. Something bad's about to happen pretty surely. All right? So remember, since almost all efforts to persuade someone to live instead of suicide will be met with agreement and relief, don't hesitate to get involved. All right? Most of the time, you will make a difference just by simply reaching out and asking a few questions. You really will. So for effective QPR, things you can say, I want you to live. I'm on your side. Okay, we'll get through this. I'm here to help you. Even if we talk, or if I can help you make a phone call, can I give you a ride somewhere? Can I call somebody for you? I'm here to help, okay? And if you can get others involved, that's always best. Other teachers, counselors, clergymen, anybody else who that can pull into your team. To say, here, we're all here to try to get you some help. You can join a team, or people, a crisis team, or community members who are willing to help out. And then, ultimately, this is not always easy for someone, but if you can follow up with a phone call, if you know that person, if you got a contact, the next day just call and say, hey, remember we talked yesterday, how you doing? Just wondering. Man, that's so powerful. That's just doing that, reaching out to someone is so powerful. Say, wow, that person wasn't kidding yesterday. They really do care. Maybe I'm worth it. So it can be very simple. So remember, when you apply QPR, it says you plant the seeds of hope. Hope prevents suicide. Suicide's about hopelessness. Right? So we can shift that. This is just some additional resources and numbers. This will be in the booklet that you're going to come home with tonight. So you'll have all this. You don't have to write this down or certainly memorize it. I haven't. Just other organizations that help people. Certainly dialing 211 now is like a suicide hotline, all right? 911's for a medical emergency, 211, to get someone on the phone that can talk to you right away. So if you know 911 and 211, right away you have two options to offer someone. We all can remember those, right? Okay, that's it. Unless there's any other questions about the QPR portion tonight. Comments, questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, with all the statistics that you gave, I'm not sure how to ask this question, with all the statistics that you gave about suicide, those include people that have overdosed and died, correct?
No.
Okay.
There
So
is...
you're assuming that someone that commits suicide did it intentionally?
For the statistics, it's what it's known it was intentional.
It's when
Now, we don't always know. We don't always know, though. But there is an overlap. There's a lot of overlap between suicide and overdose. There are more and more people thinking that people who overdose by drugs had suicidal thoughts. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't know how much fentanyl, especially these days. Maybe they didn't know what was in the drugs you took. But what is similar, the connection I see with people who are struggling with addiction, especially if they're with addiction problems, is a sense of hopelessness. People struggling with addiction are feeling like nothing I do works. I'm trying to beat this, I can't. So it's like, why bother going on? I'm never going to get better. There is no hope. So people who struggle with severe addiction and suicidal thoughts can really be similar in that way. They both can feel hopeless. And you can imagine, there's got to be no worse feeling in this world than feel like there's no hope for me. My life will never get better. And so people do surmise that there may be more of an overlap than we really know for sure about drug overdose and suicide. Yes, back there.
One population that I've found in my life now is elderly people.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost feel like they have their use anymore, and the one person I'm dealing with, I don't think would commit suicide, but we've been talking about it a lot.
Good.
But I think, and so, I'm almost 70, so there's tons of us in the world. And when we retire and maybe start getting, worn out and sicker and whatever happens, your body doesn't work like it used to, and then you start getting hopeless. So that's a huge population, part of the population now.
It sure is. It sure is. Especially you think all the things going on. Of losing my friends, I lost most of my friends, maybe I'm losing a lot of my family. I'm one of the last around.
Yeah.
And maybe I lost my spouse or my partner for many years. And I'm just tired.
Well, and seniors are growing older, and they're staying alive.
Right.
A lot more, too.
And for many of the people who are living a little bit longer, they're having more medical problems too. So the quality of life isn't always there, even though the length of life might be.
Right.
So there's lots of reasons. And what's real important, especially with the elderly, if they're struggling and they look like they're depressed, some people say, well, they're just getting old, of course. No. Depression is still an illness that needs to be treated. And I don't care how old you are, it can be treated. And there is hope. Yes?
To the question over there, the group of individuals that I work with that are addicted to opiates do not overdose on purpose. And I don't think there's that much of an because they love their families so much. They tend to hang themselves, shoot themselves. They don't want to die by an overdose because of the stigma that is attached to it for their families.
I say, wow.
Well, that's kind of what I was driving at, because in my mind, when somebody overdoses, they're trying to get high. They're not trying to kill themselves necessarily.
Well, I will inject something a little bit different there. Most people who have been struggling with drug addiction for a while are not trying to get high anymore.
They're just trying not to get
They're trying to not get what we call dope sick. It's like the worst flu you ever had, multiply it by 10, where they feel like, I can't get through the day, I can't survive. So once you build up a tolerance, once you've been addicted to these drugs, especially opiates for a while, you don't get high. You don't take the drug to get a good feeling. You take a drug to not be as sick as you would have been if you didn't use it. So again, it's not a matter of enjoying it and getting high. It's a matter of what it feels like just surviving and getting through the day. But I'm not sure. The statistics are not clear about the overlap between overdose and suicide, but there's certainly a stigma to both, to all of it, right?
That's the part
Okay.
I wasn't
In my mind, I think it's important to connect the feeling of hopelessness and helplessness that can happen with drug addiction and with severe depression and suicidal thoughts. There's a commonality there. And then however they decide to deal with that, right? Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute break before do the Narcan, but I want to say to everyone, there's someone coming with some Narcan doses here soon. They will also have booklets on the back table. I say QPR, I want you all to take a booklet. If you haven't yet, there are certificates back there to say you've been through a QPR course, right, that you can take home. You have something official holding your hand. You should be proud of yourselves. You took time out of your busy day to come here to maybe find a way to help somebody else. And it's just a little token of something to feel good about that. There's other resources back there that Lisa's put back there and myself. And so we'll take 5 minutes and then we'll do the next version, okay?
Thank you.
Back here, looks right. Okay, so we're now for part 2. And we're going to talk about the opioid epidemic and specifically Narcan. Again, the tie-in is Narcan is another very simple method. You're going to go home with 2 doses of Narcan tonight. Hopefully, the person's not here yet, but they should be here. They've always been dependable before we leave. You'll go home with Narcan. If you ever need to use it, it's saving lives every single day. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Well, just to give a little bit of background on what we're talking about when we talk about the opioid problem. Do people know what opioids are? Is anyone not sure what an opioid is? Well, I'm going to tell it anyway, even though most of you seem to know that. An opioid is a type of medication, primarily a medication, a chemical that's used to treat pain. Most of the opioids initially, way back, came from a poppy plant. So it's a natural occurring substance. Morphine and heroin come from that plant. And by using that in different ways in the lab, they've come up with other drugs that you may have heard of, Percocet and Vicodin and Tylenol with codeine, hydrocodone, Dilaudid. A while back, we don't see that too much anymore. But those are all pills, medicines, if you will, that were made to help people with pain control. Okay? Opiates work in the brain. If you think of pain, pain is a problem with the nervous system. It's the nerves that relay pain to us. So these pills, these medicines, if you will, these chemicals, opiates, work in the brain. They attach to the brain, cause a chemical reaction in the brain that can deaden pain. So after surgery, after having tooth work, sometimes we'll use these pills, right, to help us through the physical pain. Those are opiates. There are other types of opiates that are made in a lab. Fentanyl is one of those. It's not naturally occurring. It doesn't come from the poppy plant. It's made in a laboratory. But it affects the brain the same way as a regular opiate. Right now, most of fentanyl seems to be manufactured in China these days, and it's imported in different ways into the country. But that's what we talk about. We talk about opioids. Opioids, also, because of the way they work in the brain, they have a high risk for addiction. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But that's what we're talking about, okay? So when we think about the picture of what's going on lately, now opioids have been around forever. The poppy plant's probably been around on Earth forever, as far as I know. Drugs like morphine come from that, were used back even in the Civil War. So the drugs have been around and available for a long time. They're not new. Heroin came out around the turn of the 20th century. It's been around a long time. Heroin was first a treatment for morphine addiction. So these drugs have been around for a while. So this is not new. But the epidemic we're seeing now, the death rate, the amount of people getting addicted and using and abusing these drugs is new. It's different than ever before. So when we talk about what's happening now, we talk about it as coming in 3 waves. The first wave came around 1999 when there were newer forms of opioids put on the market for treat pain. The most common one we hear about is OxyContin. Okay? OxyContin was the new drug that was going to save the world. It was marketed as, this is a totally safe opioid, you cannot get addicted to it, and everyone who experiences pain in their life, physical pain, should be on this drug. That doctors, you're performing malpractice if you're not using these drugs for your patients in pain. It's that safe, and there's no need to worry about it. That's how it was marketed, okay? And a lot of doctors bought into that. Wow, This is great. I finally have an opioid. I don't have to worry about addiction. I'm going to use it. And the marketing was so strong, it got into hospitals. Hospital standards changed. They started talking about pain being the 5th vital sign. In hospitals, they had to, every shift, they had to measure your pain. Ask you, have you seen that scale of 1 to 10 with the faces on it? You ever been in the hospital? Which one are you on your pain scale? And they had to respond to you. And when you got sent home from the hospital, you got a survey sent to you. And one of the questions was, how was your pain well treated? So there was this fix on pain. And I get that. You know, we want to try to help people in pain. But life is not about being pain-free in a healthy way. It can't always be pain-free. You want to reduce it, make someone comfortable. But it shifted things. And with the belief that these drugs are now, they were told us, the research supposedly told us they were safe. The market was flooded with these pills. So people were using them. People were using more and more. And what happened, especially with OxyContin, prescribers were noticing that after a while, people were developing a tolerance, like happens with other opioids. What that means is after a while you use them, they tend to be not as effective anymore. And you need to bump up the dose. That's what we call tolerance. Well, prescribers were reporting, well, wait a minute, I'm seeing that happening with OxyContin too. They were told by the company, because you're not using a high enough dose. The pain is breaking through, so you got to raise the dose. So that was the worst thing that could have been told, because then you're higher a dose, more likely you're going to get tolerance again, and you're going to wind up addicted to this drug. You can't get it. Yes?
So, so the OxyContin you're referring to, and is it really chemically different or any different in its addiction qualities compared to the Percocet and Dilaudid and the things of the past? Or is it just that because they said it's not addictive, don't worry about it? So
there is a difference. Thank you for bringing that up. There was a chemical difference. It was sold as the first time-released opioid. So instead of having to use opioids every 4 hours throughout the day, you can use this once every 12 to 24 hours. There was a coating on it that made it delayed release. That was the new thing. And because of that coating, people were not going to be able to abuse it.
But it's but the old drugs are just as addictive as this new drug was?
Yes.
That people didn't realize or were told.
Exactly. All opioids are addictive.
Right.
But with this particular drug, we're given misinformation, and it was overused because of that reason. Okay. And what people who were building up a tolerance, if they couldn't get a higher dose when the OxyContin wasn't working as well after a while, they figured out, like some people will do, if you crush it, you destroy that coating. And that takes away what they were telling us was the protective factor. Now they're crushing it, and you can snort it, you can cook it and shoot it up into your veins and get a real super high. All right? So it became clear after a while that this was not the wonder drug, and this was leading us down a bad path. That's what we call the first wave. The second wave around 2010 happened when we finally started to realize the problem with all these opiates and the OxyContin. It was not as safe as we thought. People are getting addicted to them. And then there was kind of a backlash. You know, the pendulum swings the other way. First it was give everybody these, then it was no, maybe we shouldn't. And even pain doctors were telling people, you know what, I'm wrong, I'm reading about this, I'm backing off. I'm going to stop giving you. I know doctors that got out of the opiate business altogether. It's too risky, I'm not prescribing it anymore. Sorry, go find another doctor. I'm just not doing it. Now, if someone's building up a tolerance, they've been on these opioids for a long time, and you tell them, that's it, you're cut off, what's going to happen? And we talked about withdrawal before, how sick they are. You're going to drive that person to the street. And the people who want to sell heroin were right there waiting. They saw it coming. We got a market now. All these people are going to want heroin because they can't get their pills. So heroin flooded the market. And it was cheaper and easier to get than these pills, even though the pills weren't that difficult. So that's where heroin came into the picture. Again, it was always around, but there was a new kind of wave. And then in 2013, I talked about fentanyl. It was made in a lab. That now came into the market. And what people were doing, traffickers were mixing the fentanyl into the heroin. Fentanyl's 100 times stronger than heroin. Okay? It's more addicting because it's stronger, it's more addicting. So they figure I can get someone addicted quicker if I put some fentanyl in their heroin. All right? And what the problem is, The fentanyl is even cheaper than the heroin. And it doesn't take much to kill someone. Some of you might have seen there was a picture went around once showing the size of a penny and then a little grain of fentanyl next to it. It looks like a grain of salt. And the picture says, this much fentanyl can kill a person. I'm looking at it, I'm saying, well, wait a minute. People are doing fentanyl every day. They're not all dying. Well, because they build up a tolerance. Like with any opiate, if you do it for a while, the more you do it, you build up a tolerance. And you can handle more without dying, okay? But you never know what you're getting. When you're buying drugs on the street, that's the point. You never know what you're getting. Fentanyl has now been found in marijuana in Connecticut and other states. And fentanyl, these drug traffickers they're all for the money. They're trying to keep ahead of the game, right? They have gotten pill machines, like we use in a pill manufacturer. They buy a machine that can actually make a tablet. It presses a tablet. So they're making their pills. And they've seen pills that stamped, it says Xanax on it. It looks just like you might get from the pharmacy. But they're putting fentanyl in it because it's more addicting. It's return customers, right? So the drugs on the street now, even if it looks legit, like it came from a pharmacy, you cannot trust it. Fentanyl is everywhere. The DEA guy was telling me that it's almost impossible to find heroin anymore in Connecticut that doesn't have fentanyl in it. Fentanyl is the cause of most of the deaths recently in the last couple of years, because sometimes people are just getting fentanyl. They're not even getting heroin as much anymore. Fentanyl's gotten so easy to get and so cheap to make and manufacture that the profit margin is better for fentanyl, for people who want to sell it. So it's really changed things again. So that's where we're at today. Just a little bit of background, okay? So for many people, over 90% of people who have ever abused heroin or used heroin or fentanyl now, over 90% of them started with pills. Started with opioid pills that were prescribed to somebody along the line. Maybe them, maybe they saved it, or maybe their neighbor or someone in their family. Back in the day, I used to do that. I had surgery, I came home with 12 Percocet, I used 2, and I put them in my medicine cabinet. Maybe someday I'll sprain my ankle, I'll need one. I don't know if I'm going to go to the doctor, so I'm going to keep them around. Many of us might have done that. But then they do get into circulation. It's called diversion. They get into the circulation. I know someone who told me they hired a boy to mow their lawn. And while he's mowing the lawn, he said, can I come in and use your bathroom? Turns out he went through the medicine cabinet. I know realtors have told me they have open houses and they got to lock up the medicine cabinet. Okay? So they're getting out there. And even for people who may not use it themselves, if they can get into that supply, if a kid takes one of these to school, he can make a lot of money selling these things if he's not using them themselves. So there's a lot of motivation for people who will do those things because they're still in circulation. So the overuse of opioids is one of the reasons why we have this problem. Unused medications, like I just talked about. Diverting or sharing medications or prescriptions. Lack of perceived risk. There's a lot of idea in a lot of people, if it originally was prescribed by a doctor, it came from a pharmacy, it must be safe, right? They wouldn't give me something that's harmful. Right? People believe that, right? And in a way it's true. If you use it properly, it can be used safely. But if you don't use it properly, you could wind up in a bad way, right? So here to talk about overdoses specifically, we're getting down to the meat of things. This is kind of just looking at an upside down triangle, obviously, but looking at the rate of death per capita in each state in the country. These are the lowest deaths per capita. We've got South Dakota and Nebraska. And these are the highest. Connecticut's number 11. Out of 50 states, we're number 11. And the number of people we're losing per capita. So it's not total population. That for every 100,000 people, we're losing more than 39 other states in this country. In Connecticut, the overdose deaths, again, this says accidental deaths. We're not sure. Heard that question before. But these are the ones that are known, that are at least designated by the medical examiner to be an overdose death. You can see each year here the numbers are going up. From 17 to 18, you do see a slight decrease. Okay? And that's probably the same because we got more Narcan out. Just like you people are here today, we got more Narcan on the streets. More people are using it. We're saving more lives. But the scary thing from 2019 is looking like it's going to be the worst year ever in Connecticut. The numbers at the halfway point are already more than any other year ever in Connecticut. So we got a little hopeful last year, slightly, but it's gotten worse. So we really haven't turned a corner yet.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I couldn't read the second to last line.
The second to last
I was trying
line?
to read it. I see.
I'm sorry, down here?
Yeah.
Opioids, ODs, overdose and vending benzodiazepines, BZDs. Those are drugs, narcotic drugs that are used for anxiety, like Xanax and Adhd and Klonopin and Valium. Okay. So there's a lot of mixture. When people, I didn't spend a lot of time on that, but there are a lot of people that we're finding in overdose deaths is from a mixture of drugs. It's not always just the opioid. Because a lot of people who are using those things are also using other drugs. Okay. Who's at risk? Basically everybody's at risk if you're not doing things properly. So certainly children and adults who access unsecured medicines, as we've talked about. Teenagers who like to experiment, go to a party, they want to try something different. Right? Seniors who are prescribed multiple medications. That's a new population that is growing in overdose deaths, is senior citizens. And it tends to be related to the problem as we get older, we tend to have more medical problems. We tend to use more medications. Right? I may be on something for my blood pressure, for my diabetes, for my heart disease. I'll get to you in 1 second, okay? And so maybe at the end of the day, my arthritis is acting up, and I have a Percocet. I take a Percocet, and I can't sleep, so I take a Xanax. Both are prescribed by my doctor. He said they're safe. And then, you know, just because I want to sleep well, I'm going to wash it down with a glass of wine. There's another triad there to have to worry about. So people who don't intentionally do anything, they're not abusing anything, they're using anything that these were safe, they're prescribed by their doctor, but it's the mixture of drugs. So we're seeing more overdoses in the elderly because of a mixture of multiple medications. So this can happen to anybody. Don't think the only time you might ever need to use Narcan is some drug abuser that you find on the street. Most people overdose are in their homes. Many people who overdose are people who are chronically using opioids. Remember what I said about the elderly now. It can happen to anybody. It's to the point where now we recommend any prescriber that prescribes opioids for any reason should also prescribe Narcan. You know, it should be in every home. Like when we grew up, some of us remember our moms always had syrup of Ipecac in the medicine cabinet, right? Why? There might be an accidental overdose of poison, right? So every household should have it. Now we're saying every household should have Narcan. You don't know. Your child might go to the dentist and have a molar fixed, right? An implanted molar or a tooth root canal, and they go home with some opioids. Have the Narcan. Very simple. It can save a life. Okay? So here's what we're talking about specifically now. We're getting down to the meat of this. Marcia. Narcan. Narcan is also known as naloxone. Naloxone is the generic, if you will, scientific name. Narcan is a brand that we're going to use. Tonight, what we're going to give out is just a nasal inhaler. I'll give you one on each side if you want to pass that around. Just take a look at what we're talking about here tonight. Okay? Now, a few things you want to know about Narcan or naloxone. Number one, it is a prescription medication. We're trying to push some legislation to make it available over the counter, but we're not there yet, okay? We hope to be there because the second thing is that it's a safe medicine. You can't harm someone with Narcan. That's the great thing about this. You can't hurt someone. If you give someone Narcan, it turns out they're not overdosing on opioids, no harm done. No harm done. There's no side effects. It can't hurt anybody. The only potential side effect is if someone is in an overdose, so you're going to put them into withdrawal. Okay? But other than that, there's really no side effects. You can't hurt someone. I could squirt that up my nose right now, and I wouldn't even know the difference. It would do nothing, good or bad, for me. So it's a safe medicine. That's why we're trying to get over the counter, but not yet. But what's happened, the laws have changed some, so that people like yourselves will come to a training here. You can even go to a pharmacy, and the pharmacist could train you a little bit, and you can leave with a dose of Narcan. Okay? It only has effect if the person has opioids in their system. It only works on one thing, right? So if a person is passed out, maybe because they've been drinking, say the alcohol, it's not going to help them. If they've overdosed or taken too many other medications, it's not going to help. Okay? It only has one use. Question?
Do you know why it's not
allowed to go be an over-the-counter drug? What the argument against it is?
I want to repeat the questions. I should have before for the cameras. The question was, do I know why it's not over the counter? I don't know a good reason. I'll start with that. It's just things historically get all mangled up for different reasons. Why something's legal and why illegal. We look at our history. There was a while where alcohol was illegal in this country, and then it's legal. Marijuana was illegal, and now more and more places was illegal everywhere. Now it's becoming legal more and more places. We're not really sure how people make these decisions. Sometimes it's based on money, frankly, or other reasons. There's been racial problems that things have been made illegal in the past. There's lots of reasons why the FDA decides something's legal or illegal. So I don't know about this. But it's difficult. Another example for that is doctors can prescribe opioids for pain. Because they graduated medical school and they have a license, now they can prescribe. But they can't prescribe life-saving drugs like buprenorphine or Suboxone or methadone or Vivitrol unless they get additional training. Now, that's another law. I don't understand why they make these laws. I can give you something that can get you addicted, but if I want to give you something that can help you, I got to get more training. I don't know. So that's kind of explains my answer. I don't know why it's not legal yet, but we're trying to push that. And the other thing to know about it, you can't get high from it. There's no abuse potential. Like I said, it does nothing to you, except one thing it does, and I'm going to explain to you. How does Narcan work? First, you got to understand how opioids work. Remember I said opioids are pain pills, basically. When they're used properly, they're designed to relieve physical pain. Pain is experienced through our nervous system, which is controlled by our brain. So when you use an opioid pill, you take a Percocet or Vicodin or heroin or fentanyl, it goes into your bloodstream, whether you take a pill, whether you sniff it, whether you inject it into your bloodstream directly, it goes to your brain. Now it latches onto your brain in specific places in the brain that we call receptors. It's like it sticks to the receptor in your brain. And when it's touching that receptor, it's causing a chemical reaction in your brain. That chemical reaction is what cuts down your sensation of pain. All right? It's that chemical reaction because it's stuck to the brain receptor. That's how opioids work. What Narcan does is it gets into your bloodstream, it travels through your brain, it kicks the opioid off the receptor. You're out of here, and I'm taking over. Now it sticks to the receptor. So the opioid immediately has no more effect. The chemical reaction the opioid was causing is now stopped. It's stopped dead right there. That's how Narcan works. It kicks off the opioid, it covers the receptor in the brain, so the opioid is rendered insignificant for the moment. Okay. We're going to come back to that. That's important to know. But that's how Narcan works. Narcan stays on a receptor site for 30 to 90 minutes. It sticks onto that receptor in the brain. But it's not there forever, okay? Now, one of the major side effects of opioids, when it's a problem, is it reduces your breathing. Cuts down your breathing rate, right? Makes it harder to breathe, slows your breathing down. It affects areas of your brain that control breathing. Most people who die from an overdose is because they stopped breathing. Their brain stopped them from breathing. Their breathing center was cut down and down and down until it cuts off. We all know that's not a good thing to not breathe. There's no oxygen going to your brain or going to your body. Within minutes, you're going to start to have some brain damage. Within a few more minutes, the damage is irreversible and death will find. That's what happens with an overdose. So what we're doing is we're kicking the Narcan off of that. Narcan's kicking the opioid off the receptor. And if it was affecting their breathing, the breathing starts coming back. So it actually brings a person back who looked like they were nearly dead or all intents and purposes dead. Now they can come alive. It's amazing if you see it. It's very dramatic. But that's how it works. And it works on any opioid, but only on opioids, remember. If it's any other drugs, it's not going to have any effect. Okay? So we're going to talk about now, back to the meat of ABCs of giving Narcan. First, we talked about overdose risk factors and then how to identify an overdose and then what to do, okay? These are factors that make someone at risk of an overdose. There's one, their decreased tolerance. One thing we see, remember we talked about when you use these drugs after a while, your body gets tolerant, meaning it gets used to it and you need higher and higher levels, okay? Now, what happens when people get off it for a while, like say they're in treatment, or say they're in prison, when they get out of treatment or prison, they're most at risk for overdose. Because if they use the same amount of drugs they used to use, their tolerance dropped. The body's no longer used to using that much. So they don't realize that. I used to use this before. They go out and use it, and the first time is an overdose. So when people have been all away from it a long time, that puts them at risk. They have a decreased tolerance. If they're using alone, there's more risk of overdose. If you're mixing drugs, remember I said a lot of people that the medical examiner is finding out who die from overdose, there are other drugs in the system too. Alcohol, what we call benzos, Xanax, Valium, things like that, in combination with other things. The quality or strength of the drug can be unpredictable. That can be a cause of overdose, right? If you have other health issues on top of it, especially lung issues like asthma, but also liver and heart disease, AIDS, malnourishment, that puts you at more risk of an overdose. Or if you're previously overdosed, right? Or if you intravenously, you can overdose quicker. The more concentration of that chemical gets to the brain quicker, all right? And AIDS, the older a person is and the longer they've been using drugs, the more likely they can have an overdose as well. Any questions with that so far? Okay.
I have a question. It goes back a little ways, but if you're addicted to opioids and you reach a level that that your tolerance is greater and you need to take more of the drug in order for your pain to be managed, if you withdraw from the drug completely, what I'm trying to figure out, can the drug be what's causing your pain at that point?
Drug be what's causing the pain?
Cause the pain, like a lot of drugs that you're on actually can cause what you're on them for?
The question was if you're on opioids for a while, and you have chronic pain, can the drugs, if you build up a tolerance, actually be causing pain? It's not been known to cause pain, but they can be less effective. You can have the breakthrough pain regardless of taking the drug. Once you build up a tolerance, it becomes less effective. So you might be right back to where you were. You're feeling the pain again, but it's not because the drug is causing the pain, it's because the drug is losing its effectiveness because you built up a tolerance. Okay? So how to identify an overdose? Step one. All right? Now remember, the thing to remember about this is overdose and opiates means the breathing is slowing down or stopped. That's what an overdose is about, so there's less oxygen getting to the brain. So we see signs of people who are getting less oxygen. Number one, they're unresponsive or minimally responsive, right? They look like you can't wake them up. They're very drowsy. Maybe you can't wake them up at all or barely. And you look for signs of less oxygen. If someone's, was suffocating, you see bluish, a blue tinge, especially on the face, the lips, the nail beds, you'll see a bluish. Their breathing is shallow, meaning you can barely see the chest move, all right? Or they're not breathing at all, or they're breathing too slow. One thing particular about opioids, if you look at the pupils on the eyes, which is the black dot in the center of your eye, that's called your pupil. The pupils will get very, very tiny. They call it pinpoint. Looks like the point of a pin. You can barely see it's there. They're constricted. It's that small. That can be a sign of opioid overdose. They might be breathing, but the airway is getting tighter, and they can't breathe well. So you hear gurgling, you hear snoring a lot, and other evidence of that they've been using drugs. Say you're seeing needles or bottles of pills around. So these are all evidence that you put together. It sounds like this might be an opioid overdose. All right. So that's the kind of things you're going to see. So the first thing you do, like if you know CPR, what's the first thing you do? Annie, wake up, right? Remember Annie? That's the first thing you do. You try to rouse them. Maybe they're just sleeping. Maybe they had one too many drinks and they're tired. We don't know. But it's always the first thing you do. You try to rouse them. If you shake them and call their name and they don't wake up, they don't respond, you use what we call the sternal rub. You make a good knuckle there like that. You rub it real hard on the sternum, the breastbone there. You rub it real hard. It's going to hurt them. If they can wake up, they will when you do that. I was like, what the heck is going on? All right? So you want to try that. If you get nothing, 911. 911 and using the Narcan right away. Always call 911. Narcan might work. It might work within minutes, but that's not the end of the story. We're going to talk about that. You always want to call 911. Because even if you don't know for sure even if it's an overdose, if the Narcan's going to work. First of all, it could be having a heart attack. There could be something else going on. So automatically call 911, right? First thing. So you try to rouse them, no response, you call 911. You've seen some of the signs, you think this might be an overdose. Remember, if you're not sure it's an overdose, doesn't matter. You go this next step anyway, because you give the Narcan, you can't hurt them. So don't say, well, I'm not sure if this is an overdose or not. If you're not sure, just give it. You can't hurt them, all right? So what we try to do, you're going to get them on their back, you're going to put your hand behind their neck so their chin comes up a little bit, opens up the airway, right? And you take the Narcan, the one I saw pass around, it's a nasal thing, you just squeeze it. Put it in the nostril and squeeze. That's it. You've administered Narcan. It's as simple as that. One squeeze, the whole dose will go in there, all right? Yeah, thank you. The whole dose will go in there, all right? That's it. That's it. Put it in the nostril, squeeze. There, like that. You've given Narcan. It's really that simple, okay? But, excuse me?
Has anybody, even with administering it,
has anybody not come back? Yes. Many times. There's many reasons for that.
it was just too late?
Well, it could be too late. If there's too much brain damage, if they've been without oxygen too long, no Narcan's going to bring them back, all right? Just like if someone's died of a cardiac arrest and you do CPR, if they've been out for a long enough time, there's brain damage, you might not bring them back. Right? There's other reasons which we're going to talk about in just a minute too, of why this dose of Narcan might not work.
Are they all switching over to only nasal Narcans? Because I know there's the kind that has a needle in it and you can put it through the clothing and stuff like that. I've had training with that kind as well.
Right.
Do they mostly just use the nasal kind now, or is it either or?
Okay, if you haven't heard, there's a question about, there are different forms of Narcan. There's injectable forms of Narcan. This is a nasal form that we're talking about tonight. There's a few different injectable forms. There's one that even has a little talking gadget that talks your way through it, right? The problem is that's super expensive. And it's no better than the Narcan you're getting tonight, which is more reasonably priced, okay? So there are different forms.
I know that.
They're all good.
One of them, if one of them is used more often than not, will they do away with the injectable kind and only continue with the nasal kind? That's kind of...
Yeah, I don't know if they'll do away with it. One of the nice things about the injectable kind is you usually would give it, you push it right through the clothes. You can do it right in the thigh. You can inject it right into a thigh, right through the clothes. All right? And it's quick and easy and it talks to you. And if you're nervous and you forget how to use it, it tells you. So there's a good reason for that. But I think the price is why it's not used as widely. That's the only thing. I don't know if it's going to go away.
Okay.
If the price ever comes down to what you're getting now, we're going to be using that one instead. All right? Okay. All right, so you give the spray into the nose. And then so we've already called 911, and now you've given the Narcan. So you've really done what we're talking about tonight. But when you call 911 for any reason, you want to give them as much information as possible. You want to tell them what you saw, what you thought, where you are. If you say I'm in Eno Memorial Hall, I got lost walking around here. You want to tell them, if you go in this door, come down the hallway, take a right, maybe you can send someone out there to wait for them so they can get here quicker. You always want to do that when you call 911, all right? And tell them and you want to tell them what you did, what I saw. I think there might have been an overdose. I gave them some Narcan. Give them some information as they're driving in so they're coming in prepared, okay? Now, as we said, a lot of people are not breathing well when you're doing this. It can take a few minutes for the Narcan to work when it works. So you might have to give some rescue breathing, like with CPR. In the little bags you're going to get today, you're going to get a box with 2 doses of Narcan. You're going to get a little red pouch that has a little plastic mouth guard. You just open it up, you put it right over the person's mouth. Right, you have their head back, you pinch their nose, you put your mouth on theirs, you have the mouth guard in between, and you give them 2 good breaths. And then until help gets there, 1 breath every 5 minutes, until help gets there, or they start breathing on their own. All right, that might have been part of it. I'm sorry?
1 every 5
5 seconds. Did I say 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Don't do what this guy said. Every 5 minutes. My God. Thank you. Every 5 seconds, right? I'm sorry?
Can you give them a double shot?
Well, that's what we're going to happen next. If in 2 to 3 minutes you see nothing, you have an second dose here, you give them another shot in the other nostril. Okay? Most people that are getting revived these days are taking more than 1 dose, to be honest with you. The drugs are getting stronger. There's more and more fentanyl. Fentanyl's stronger. Fentanyl's a little bit more difficult to bring someone back. Sometimes EMS is given 4 and 5 doses to bring someone back. So you may not see something right away, okay? But you want to do some rescue breathing, because even if it does work, it could take a few minutes. And that's more minutes without any oxygen getting to the brain.
1 dose per shot? Or is it...
1 dose. 1 squeeze, 1 dose. That's it. Done. All right? You have a second dose in case you need it a few minutes later. 1 squeeze in the other nostril. All right? It's metered dose is right there. That's all you have to do is squeeze it in. Okay? Now, if someone starts to come around, they start breathing again. Like if you know CPR, we use this rescue position. Right? You want to put them on their side. Their top leg and their top arm, bring them over their body so they don't fall back so easy. Because especially if you've done some rescue breathing, you're blowing air, and so you might get some air in their stomach and they might vomit. So you don't want someone on their back. So if they vomit, they're going to breathe it right back in. So you turn them on their side. It's called the rescue breathing. Now, there's a few other things you want to know. What you're doing with using Narcan when it works is you're putting someone into immediate withdrawal. Remember I said you're taking that opiate off their brain. You're cutting it off right away. They're going into withdrawal, which what they were using to try to avoid, remember? So they can wake up, first of all, feeling very agitated and confused. They don't know what just happened. Why are these people around me? What are you doing? They're scared. They might be agitated. They might feel pretty miserable because they're in withdrawal, okay? Be prepared for that. Be safe. You might step back. Be careful. If they're not calm, you want to give yourself some space. Just know that that can happen, all right? They wake up and they don't even know what's going on. They may be scared, or who are these people, right? So you want to know that. The other thing you want to know, you want to stay with them, though, for a while, because here's one thing that happens with Narcan. You might have saved their life. You knock the opioid off their brain, they come back, they're breathing, now they're sitting up, they're talking to you, they're looking a lot better. But Narcan can only stay around for, remember, 60, maybe sometimes 90 minutes. And then it slips off the brain again. All right? It's like a lot of drugs, we take them, our body gets rid of them after a while, right? This happens with Narcan. The problem is opioids stay around a little bit longer in the bloodstream than Narcan. So this person, without using another opioid, can go back into an overdose because it's still in their system. The Narcan wears off, the opioid's still there. Remember, I said it's another reason to call 911. They could go back into an overdose. They really need to get medical care. Now, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes people get up and they run. I'm out of here, all right? But that's the goals. You want to understand that they can re-overdose, even just without using any more opioids. So you want to stay with them, you want to talk to them about that, and always have 911 calling, okay? All right. A couple of things I want to say as we're wrapping up here. I'm not going to get into all the laws. We're trying to get more laws, like I said, getting Narcan to be sold over the counter. But what I want you to know for tonight, 2 important things are part of what we call the Good Samaritan Law. There's 2 aspects to that excuse me, that I think are appropriate tonight. Number 1, if any of you now goes out there and you administer Narcan to someone who you think is overdosed, whether they overdosed for real or not, you thought they overdosed, you gave them Narcan, you are not legally liable for anything that happens next. The person wakes up and said, you shouldn't be touching me. You're in trouble for assault. You shouldn't be near me. Legally, you're safe. All right? The law is there to protect you, to try to save a life. Remember, you can't do them harm with Narcan. So you're not doing them harm, except you're taking away their high. You're putting them into withdrawal. They may not be happy about that part, but you're not doing them any harm. The law protects you. So don't let that concern stop you. All right? The other concern that's really important with the Good Samaritan Law, we need to talk to everybody about, especially our younger people. We need to tell them all that if you're using these drugs with someone and that person overdoses, you need to get them help. If police, EMS come, you will not get in trouble. You will not get arrested. If you have drugs, you have paraphernalia on you, you will not get arrested for possession. Now, if you want it for something else, if you want it for robbery or larceny, they can get you. All right? But if you're just using drugs, the police will come, they'll take your drugs, you will not get arrested. Again, we want people to call.
So can I just clarify what you just said? So if I'm sitting in a room and I'm using, and you're using with me, and I overdose, and let's say you have Narcan, and you Narcan me, and they call 911,
Right.
I'm understanding that if I have 8 bags of heroin, a pound of weed, whatever the case may be, I'm not getting arrested. Either one of us are just going to take
You will
it.
not get arrested for possession. If there are other things going on, if you're known to be selling it, that's separate. But at that moment, let me give you a horrible example that I know of someone personally who knew my son Tim. These 2 boys were driving around in a car using heroin, and one of them overdosed while they were driving around and died in the car. His buddy driving him was too afraid to go to an emergency room, to go to the police. He was scared out of his mind. I'm going to get in trouble. So he drove around for hours and hours and hours with his dead friend in the back seat because he was so afraid. We want to get that word out there. Don't be afraid. Call. You will not get in trouble. Not enough people know that. I encourage everyone to tell everybody you know. They need to know that. They will save a life. This poor guy has to live with that now. He didn't help his buddy. His buddy is now gone. And maybe if he knew that, if he could have got him help, maybe this person would be alive today. I don't know.
Now, did that gentleman get in trouble for not doing something?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yes, he's,
Did he get in trouble?
yes, he's in jail.
He's in jail.
Is he he's in jail for murder, or do you?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. So I don't know other specifics. But the whole point is we want to get people to know. If you call, they come, and they find you with drugs in your pocket, you will not get arrested. We'd rather have you save a life. All right? That's really important to know. We're wrapping up here. Other legislation, like I'm talking about in Connecticut, we're trying to get Narcan to be over the counter. There are now limits on what prescribers can prescribe, how many doses of opioids they can prescribe after surgery or dental work. So we put some limits on that now, which is good. There is a couple of things about Narcan. When you have it now, you have to store it in moderate temperatures. It's not the kind of thing you leave in your glove compartment in the middle of the summer. It will destroy the chemical makeup of it, and it will not be effective. So too extreme in heat or too extreme in cold. You don't want it in your refrigerator either. You want to try to keep it room temperature. So if you want to have it with you, you throw it in your purse, you throw it in your pocket, you throw it in your backpack, so you can bring it in and out with you if you want to have it around. But don't leave it in your glove compartment, which a lot of people used to do. Okay? And it generally will expire in 1 to 2 years. Like other drugs, they do have expiration dates. Again, I tell people, I'll get to you in 1 second, okay? I tell people, if that's all you have, give it anyway. I don't care if the expiration date is passed. Some drugs will still work late, if it's all you have. But you can get refills, okay? You can get it from the state, you can get it from any pharmacy now, you can get Narcan from as well. There was a question here?
So how is it that we're getting this tonight? Like, you said it wasn't over the counter.
Right.
So how is it that?
Well, we got special dispensation. We got Marcia here who works alongside with the state of Connecticut. There is legislation, there are grants now to pay for these doses. Okay. And there's legislation that's made it easier that if you go to a training and we track where the doses are going, we're not taking your whole name or anything, but that was given out, that the law has been loosened some so that we can do that. This is one of the few prescription drugs that we can do this way.
Because you give them to addicts. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was going to be my question. Can an active addict? Oh, I didn't see that.
There's a question.
Oh. Can they get it?
Yes. Anybody can get it. No questions asked.
So if an addict was out on the street and he went somewhere, could he walk in, get it himself, or how does he or she get it?
Anyone can get it legally. But that doesn't mean you can get it for free anywhere you want it, all right? There are trainings like this where you can get it for free. There are other organizations, if you look around, like there's one in Hartford that does meetings every Wednesday, you can go and get it for free. But any pharmacy can get it, but it has to be paid for by someone. The pharmacy isn't giving it out free. If you have insurance, if you're at an Adhd, you're struggling, you have Husky insurance or even state insurance or many commercial insurances, that'll pay for it.
Do they have to have a prescription?
No. Pharmacies now, pharmacists can give it without a prescription.
Good to know.
We are providing this to you without a prescription tonight. So you can't get it without a prescription. A question back
I
there.
went to CVS. They would not give it to me without a prescription. I went to my doctor and asked for a prescription. They would not write me a prescription. My daughter had ankle surgery, was prescribed Oxy.
Yeah.
I asked him for a prescription. He wouldn't give me one.
Wow. Wow. That's outrageous.
You go to Walmart with
That's malpractice. That's neglect. That can't be tolerated. I believe you. A lot of people are not doing the right things these days. Now, I will say, every pharmacist had to go to a special training to be able to, like I am doing, to train people to use Narcan. So maybe not every pharmacist has done that, but almost every pharmacy has some on board, right? Marcia, do you want to add something to that?
So there's if you go on the Department of Consumer Protection website, you can see what pharmacies have a trained, certified pharmacist.
I did. They listed CVS right over there.
Well, don't go to CVS anymore. That's wrong. I believe, it's not a law, every prescriber that prescribed an opioid should prescribe Narcan right alongside. You should go home with 2 prescriptions. That's outrageous. That should never happen. That's horrible. Yes?
I know personal experience, if you go to Walmart with state insurance in Avon, they'll give it to you for free, all you have to do is ask for it.
Cool. Cool.
But yeah, when you get a treatment, if you go home or to a sober living facility, depending on where you go, they'll give you Narcan.
Great.
When I got out of rehab in 2017, they gave me that box.
Great. So we're
in Florida, and I definitely am glad that I received training.
See, the laws are getting more liberal, thankfully. We're saving more lives all the time. Other questions?
Are you saying if we were to administer that to someone, that we could then go into a pharmacy and ask for more, or we would still need a refill prescription?
Great question.
Well, Marcia, go right ahead.
In your little kit bag, my business card is in there. If you give this out to someone and you need another one, you just call me, okay? We prioritize people that are actually using it to save a life, so I will come to your house and give you one.
See that? So once you've been here, now you're good for life. You use it or it expires, call that number, you can get another dose. But certainly pharmacies are supposed to be giving it out without a prescription. It was just a pharmacist spending some time explaining it to you. They're supposed to be doing that in this state. That's horrible that happened.
Another reason why people don't go to the pharmacy is because it shows up on your medical record. So some people are like, oh, I don't want to go to my doctor, and then they're going to ask me why I have Narcan. I can tell you from personal experience, when I went to the doctor and they said, why do you have Narcan? Why are you taking Narcan? I said, that's for my loved one. And I could have been afraid, I could have been ashamed to say that, but actually the nurse who asked me that said, really? I have a loved one too. Can you tell me about where I can get help for my loved one? So you know what? It's just time to just deal with it.
All right. So we're doing here tonight, we're talking about it. We get more people talking, we get more people to understand what's going on and to make this easier to get. Yes, back there?
Do you know if, I work at a high school, do you think the high schools have the nurse's office having Narcan now?
It depends on the school. Avon, maybe some schools do. I know not every school does. Not every school system does, but some are smarter. Yeah. Yes?
I have 2 questions. One is, so is the Narcan absorbed through the nose because you're blood or because you're breathing it?
It's the bloodstream.
Bloodstream.
I mean,
So it's absorbed.
theoretically, you're breathing it. If there's any breath, even if it's a slight, it's going to be absorbed through the mucus and get into your bloodstream. All right?
All right, so.
If the person's already too far gone, it will be
So
ineffective.
their heart has, if it's absorbed in the blood, the heart has to be beating.
At least a little bit, at least a little bit. It doesn't have to be much.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the second question is that there was something I saw on TV, and I can't remember where it was, that could have been a cop show for all I know, or it could have been the news, but there was something about like the police were exposed to some fentanyl, and then they were getting high.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, like,
Yeah, that
if
was on the
somebody
news.
has,
It was on the news.
so if somebody has overdosed on fentanyl, is there exposure to someone who's trying to save them?
Potentially there is. If you get it on your skin and then it goes into your nose or your mouth, just from skin contact, it's not absorbed through the skin. Fentanyl doesn't go through your skin. But many of us don't realize that we touch our nose, we touch our mouth, or it can have an entryway into the body. And then now it can get into your system and people have overdosed. It's possible. So we always want to think about safety first. But we always have the mask. It's mouth to mouth, right? If someone's got it in their bloodstream, I've never heard it be communicated from mouth to mouth at that point. Okay? But if the powdered fentanyl is sitting around, that's what I'm talking about. That if you get that on you and then you touch your mouth or your nose, it can get into your bloodstream.
So the policeman probably...
They're always trained to wear gloves.
Exactly.
First of all, right? It's even happened with dogs. Drug sniffing dogs have sniffed fentanyl and needed to be revived with Narcan.
No.
Because it gets into their stream. Okay.
Can we use this on a dog?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not a veterinarian. I don't know. I don't want to say yes and then a dog. I don't know that. But ask your vet. A question?
I just wanted to say, just to be clear, so that, just to answer your question about the exposure. So people who aren't familiar with how heroin comes in little paper bags. And so you would have to touch the heroin in the bag. So it's not like it's just free floating in the air. And so if you go into this person and you touch this person, you risk the fentanyl, affecting your body. You would have to touch the heroin or the drugs that have the fentanyl in it. Does that make sense?
And then have it get into your body, right? There was a misconception that it's absorbed through the skin. It's been proven not true. Just by touching it alone, you won't get it. But if it gets into you, into your body, into your bloodstream, then it can be a problem.
So like when my son passed away, when my son passed away, I went through his coat and his pockets and I gathered all these little packages and I put them in the kitchen garbage. And then when the policeman came, he said, do you know if there's any anywhere so we can look for markings on the bags? And I said, oh yeah, they're right here in the kitchen garbage. And he said, please don't touch those. And I said, oh, well, I already did. So even that, I touched all them and nothing. So, it was just his fear of there being anything. But it even is that much nothing.
But it's just another thought when you come upon a scene to think about your own safety as well. Especially if there could be needles around too. You don't want a needle prick. You don't know what's in that needle, okay? Any final questions before we wrap up?
If we're trying to get the Narcan at a pharmacy, assuming we have a friendly pharmacist,
Yes.
if the insurance we have doesn't cover it, any idea what the cost is?
Last $75 I heard for what we're giving out tonight, a double dose. That seems to be the going price. Okay. But again, now you're going to have a bag with a phone number. You don't have to pay for it again.
But priceless if you need it.
Right. Well, make sure you get it. The whole point is we got to get this out there. This is saving lives every single day.
How do you set up a meeting like this for different places?
Well, you can start by calling the number on the bag, right? Or talking to Lisa or anybody you know. My card, my information's there. I have brochures on the table. Or anybody you know, and just talk it around. That's all I can tell you.
If you're interested in making this community a recovery-friendly community, so
Yeah.
if you're interested, you should be talking to Lisa.
There you go. Okay. I will want to speak for Lisa. I'm happy to do this over and over again. If there's an opportunity, we want to get the word out. Yes?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I noticed, because I looked at the brochure, because I was fanning myself because it was so warm, that you have you have an organization, so I don't know if you wanted to say a few words and just kind of tell people that, you know, we can take the $75 that we're not paying for this stuff and kind of donate to you, donate to this.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that. You know, we're one of many organizations. Certainly Lisa's organization too. There's a lot of us that, too many of us have been formed in honor of someone that we've lost. But I do a lot of public speaking. I do education at schools. I've talked to the health department. I've talked to many groups. Anybody that'll listen, churches, Boy Scouts, troops, anybody, to talk not just about Narcan and QPR, but just to learn about addiction and mental illness and how we can help each other and we can understand this problem. We also have, as Lisa mentioned, our memorial poster project that we've traveled around New England. We've been to Philly once and DC once, trying to put a face to the numbers so we can make this real for people. When you hear 72,000 people died last year, that's bad enough. But when you see the faces, and you look at them and you see your friends, your family, your neighbors, it makes it more real and it makes us believe we all got to do something about that. So we do that. We also do scholarships. We try to help young people who, in activities that kind of build their self-esteem. We gave $500 to an inner city art teacher in Waterbury to buy some recorders for their music class because the school couldn't afford them. So we wanted kids to be able to experience and things like that. So we're trying to do different things in our community, as is Lisa. Again, but there's many groups like that. And if you contact one of us, if we don't know the answer, we probably know someone that we can connect you with. Okay? Thank you all very much again for tonight.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.